How Japan rose from nuclear ashes to global superpower in 20 years, August 6, 1945. A single bomb fell on Hiroshima. 80,000 people died in seconds, not from bullets, not from an invasion, from one bomb dropped from one plane. 3 days later, another bomb hit Nagasaki. 40,000 more dead. Japan surrendered. The mighty empire that conquered half of Asia was finished. Cities reduced to radioactive rubble, factories destroyed, economy collapsed, millions homeless, starving. American soldiers landed on Japanese soil. For the first time in 2,600 years, foreign troops occupied Japan. This nation was dead. 20 years later, Japan hosted the Olympic Games. Bullet trains traveled at 200 kilometers per hour. Japanese cars flooded American highways. Japanese electronics sat in living rooms across the planet. The corpse had become an econ. How does a nation bombed into oblivion become the second largest economy on Earth in 2 decades? This is the strangest resurrection story in modern history. Look at Japan in September 1945. 66 cities had been firebombed. Tokyo was 50% destroyed. Osaka was 35% destroyed. Entire neighborhoods were ash. Industrial capacity was gone. Ports were unusable. Railroads were wrecked. 9 million people were homeless. Food production had collapsed. Starvation was spreading. And unlike Germany, which could rebuild on solid ground, Japan had 2 cities still glowing with radiation. American analysts predicted Japan would need 100 years to recover. Some said never. The nation would remain an agricultural backwater forever. They couldn't have been more wrong. The first piece of luck was Douglas MacArthur. The Supreme Commander arrived with absolute authority. He could have crushed the Japanese people, extracted revenge, humiliated the nation that killed so many American soldiers. Instead, he did something unexpected. MacArthur decided to rebuild Japan, not as punishment, but as a project. He understood something that pure revenge would have missed. A destroyed Japan helps nobody. A rebuilt Japan becomes an ally. The Cold War had started. China would fall to communism within 4 years. Korea would explode into war. America needed a stable. MacArthur began reshaping Japanese society from the ground up. Land reform came first. Before the war, a tiny elite owned most farmland. Millions of peasants worked as tenant farmers, paying crushing rents, trapped in poverty. MacArthur forced redistribution of 38% of all cultivated land. Landlords had to sell. Former tenants could buy at cheap prices. Almost overnight, 5 million Japanese families This created something Japan never had: a rural middle class with money to spend. Consumer demand exploded. The next reform targeted industrial giants. Before the war, 4 massive conglomerates called zaibatsu controlled the economy. They funded militarism. They profited from conquest. MacArthur broke them up, forced them to split into smaller companies, made them compete against each other. Competition forced innovation. Companies that had grown fat now had to. Then came the Constitution. MacArthur's team wrote a new constitution in 1 week. Japan renounced war forever. No army, no navy, no air force. Critics called it humiliation. But it became Japan's secret weapon. While other nations spent 15% of budgets on military, Japan spent almost nothing. Every yen that would have bought tanks instead bought factories. The pacifist constitution was an economic gift wrapped in defeat. But American reforms alone did. The Japanese people created it themselves. Something shifted in national psychology after surrender. Before the war, Japanese energy poured into military conquest. Pride came from soldiers and admirals. After the war, that energy needed somewhere to go. It went into work. Japanese workers threw themselves into rebuilding with shocking intensity. 12-hour days, 6-day weeks, total dedication. This wasn't slave labor. It was something a collective channeling of national humiliation into productive energy. Japanese companies developed legendary management philosophy, lifetime employment. Workers joined a company and stayed for their entire career. In exchange, companies invested heavily in training. This created workforces with deep expertise. Knowledge stayed within companies instead of walking out the door. Quality control became an obsession. An American statistician, Edwards Deming, had developed manufacturing theories that American companies ignored. Japanese companies embraced them. Deming taught that quality came from perfecting every step of the process, finding problems at the source, continuous improvement, the Japanese word for it, kaizen. American factories produced goods, then checked for defects. Japanese factories prevented defects from happening. The difference showed in products that simply worked better. The Korean War accelerated. June 1950. North Korea invaded South Korea. America suddenly needed military supplies, trucks, uniforms, ammunition, medical equipment. Japan became the workshop. American orders poured into Japanese factories. Companies struggling to survive suddenly had guaranteed customers. The war pumped billions into the Japanese economy. The conflict that devastated Korea gave Japan an industrial boost. Geography turned from curse to blessing. Japan has almost no natural resources, no oil, no coal worth mentioning. Before the war, this drove conquest. They invaded Southeast Asia for rubber and oil. They invaded China for coal and iron. After the war, resource scarcity forced a different strategy. Import raw materials, transform them into high-value products, export to the world, buy cheap, add value, sell expensive. By the mid-1950s, Japan exported textiles. By the early 1960s, electronics. By the mid-1960s, cars. The first Japanese vehicles in America, small, underpowered, unreliable. Within 10 years, nobody was laughing. Japanese automakers cracked the code Detroit refused to see. American companies made big, heavy, gas-guzzling vehicles. Japanese companies asked different questions. What if cars were smaller, lighter, more fuel-efficient? What if they lasted longer? The answers created an industry that would surpass Detroit. In 1964, Japan hosted the world watched as a nation that had been radioactive rubble unveiled technological wonders. The Shinkansen bullet train started service, the first high-speed rail in the world. The Olympics were a coming-out party. Japan announced to the planet that it had arrived. The economy kept growing, 10% annual growth in the 1960s. By 1968, Japan passed West Germany to become the second largest economy on Earth. 23 years, from nuclear destruction to globe. The social cost was real. Japanese workers sacrificed everything. Time with family, personal health, leisure. The phrase karoshi entered the language. Death from overwork, heart attacks at desks, bodies giving out from exhaustion, environmental damage piled up, rivers poisoned, air polluted. The miracle had victims, but the achievement remains staggering. No nation had ever grown so fast from such destruction. Not Germany, not South Korea. Japan wrote the playbook other Asian nations would follow. Taiwan studied it. South Korea copied it. Singapore adapted it. China learned from it. Japan's resurrection changed global economics. American companies suddenly faced competition they didn't understand. Japanese products were better and cheaper. An island nation with no resources had beaten industrial giants at their own game. The deeper story is about national psychology. Japan took the shame of defeat and converted the same discipline that created kamikaze pilots, created salaryman warriors. The same unity that sustained war sustained rebuilding. Japanese leaders made conscious choices. They kept the emperor as a symbol of continuity. They accepted occupation without resistance. They poured resources into education. Every decision pointed toward one goal: rebuild faster than anyone thought possible. There's an image that captures. In 1945, Japanese children scavenged American garbage dumps for food. In 1970, Japanese engineers designed the cameras that American tourists used on vacation. The children who ate from garbage now made products the garbage givers couldn't live without. 25 years, one generation. The nation that lost everything gained something no one expected. Not an empire of territory, an empire of industry. Not dominance through soldiers. The mushroom clouds seemed like endings. They became beginnings. The bomb forced a reset. Painful, traumatic, radioactive, but a reset. From that reset emerged something the old Japan could never have become. An economic superpower that conquered the world without firing a single shot. The nation that attacked Pearl Harbor became the nation that built cars in American driveways. Military discipline became manufacturing discipline. Warrior spirit became worker spirit. Same different direction. August 1945. Ashes and radiation and defeat. October 1964. Bullet trains and Olympics and the second largest economy on Earth. The distance between those moments should have been impossible to cross. Japan crossed it anyway. And the world is still trying to understand